No one paid attention to the ordinary-looking man standing in line at the bank lobby. But what they didn't know was that this was Nathan Hale, CEO of Summit National Bank, undercover to expose the flaws within his own empire. He wasn't there to make a transaction. He was there to uncover a truth that had been hidden for far too long. And what he was about to discover would shake the foundation of an entire banking empire. Nathan Hale stood outside the glass doors of Branch 042, one of the flagship locations of Summit National Bank, right in the heart of downtown Chicago. Reflected in the glass wasn't the usual image of a sharply dressed CEO in an expensive tailored suit, but a man in a worn leather jacket, white shirt, and faded jeans. A few days' worth of stubble lined his jaw, and his tousled hair gave him the look of an out-of-work engineer rather than the head of the Midwest's largest financial institution. And that was exactly the point. For the past 3 months, internal reports had shown customer satisfaction plummeting and complaints doubling. Yet no one in upper management could pinpoint why. Nathan no longer trusted the numbers. He needed to see it for himself, to understand what was really happening to his own customers. He took a deep breath and stepped through the doors. No familiar handshakes from the receptionist, no VIP badge, no admiring glances. Just a middle-aged man blending into the long line of waiting clients. Polished marble floors, sleek LED lighting, all personally approved by Nathan in countless board meetings. But from this angle, it all looked cold, distant, and then his attention was drawn to a conversation unfolding near the waiting area. A man in his 40s, dressed in a suit but with a face tightened in frustration, was speaking to an elderly woman clutching a worn leather handbag. "It's outrageous. I have perfect credit, steady business income, never missed a single payment. And they denied my business expansion loan without a decent explanation." The elderly woman nodded, her voice trembling. "I know the feeling, dear. My entire life savings, 40 years of saving for my granddaughter, vanished from my account. They just said the transaction was properly authorized. I've filed 3 complaints. No one's responded." Nathan felt his chest tighten. This wasn't about a single loan or a one-off transaction error. This was a pattern. A qualified business owner denied credit. An elderly woman's savings wiped clean. Both treated as if they were no one. The man politely handed over a business card. "I'm Anthony Ruiz. If you need help, I know some folks in the legal community. Maybe if we speak up together." As Mrs. Langston was called up to the counter, Nathan watched her hunched figure shuffle forward, face weary and full of quiet despair. To the bank employees, she was just another file, but to Nathan, she was a warning sign. Then his phone buzzed. A system notification. "Your credit loan application has been denied. Please contact a loan officer for more information." Nathan frowned. Under his undercover identity, Daniel Chin, his profile included excellent credit, steady income, no missed payments, no financial red flags. There was no logical reason for a denial, unless the system itself was being manipulated. And at that moment he knew, whatever was happening inside this bank was worse than he had imagined. Mrs. Langston made her way to teller window 4 on trembling legs, her worn leather handbag heavy with the weight of a life that felt stolen. She was met by a young bank employee, hair tied in a high ponytail, neat uniform, and a face devoid of emotion. The woman typed rapidly on her keyboard, never once looking up. "Excuse me, dear," Mrs. Langston began, her voice raspy with worry. "I'm here to ask about my savings account. There was over $80,000 in it, saved for my granddaughter. But this morning, when I checked, there wasn't a single cent left." The teller kept her eyes glued to the screen, reciting in a mechanical tone, "We've reviewed the account. All transactions were authorized. Nothing appears abnormal." "That's impossible," Mrs. Langston gasped, tightening her grip on her bag. "I never made any of those transfers. I never gave anyone access to my account. I've come here 3 times this month. No one will give me a real answer. If you're dissatisfied, the teller replied, her voice growing impatient, you're welcome to file another formal complaint. We'll review it. I already have. Mrs. Langston's voice cracked, a plea on the edge of tears. That was money my husband saved all his life before he passed. He worked 2 jobs so we could leave something for our granddaughter, so she could go to college. Now, she won't even have a chance at a decent education. A wave of uncomfortable silence swept through the room. Some customers glanced her way, then quickly turned back. A few sighed, as if annoyed by the disruption. No one stepped forward. No one said a word. Nathan Hale, still undercover as Daniel Chin, watched from a short distance away. His jaw clenched. Just minutes earlier, he had seen hope in the old woman's eyes. Hope that maybe, just maybe, someone would help her. Now all that remained was quiet humiliation. And then, the moment that made Nathan's blood run cold happened. 2 security guards approached, their faces unreadable. One of them spoke, calm but firm. Ma'am, if you continue to disrupt the branch's operations, we'll have to ask you to leave the premises. I just want someone to listen, Mrs. Langston whispered, nearly in tears, her hands clinging to the edge of the counter. The guards didn't argue. They gently but firmly escorted her toward the exit, not with force, but with unwavering resolve. Her small footsteps echoed faintly on the marble floor like a sorrowful melody left unfinished. Nathan couldn't believe what he was witnessing. Mrs. Langston, a wife, a mother, a grandmother who had given everything, was being treated like a burden. No branch manager stepped forward. No one double-checked her file. There was only protocol and indifference. When the revolving door sealed shut behind her, the bank returned to its artificial calm as if nothing had happened. But inside Nathan, something had detonated. He knew. He had to act. And he wouldn't act alone. Because what just happened to Mrs. Langston was happening, had happened, and would continue to happen to hundreds, maybe thousands more. As the revolving door of the Summit National Bank branch closed behind Mrs. Langston, Nathan Hale remained still by the brochure stand, his eyes fixed on the spot where she had just stood. Next to him, a well-dressed, middle-aged man with a tense expression muttered under his breath. Another one. He shook his head, lowering his voice. It's happening more and more, and no one's saying a word. Nathan turned. The man was Anthony Ruiz, owner of a well-known restaurant chain in the city. Nathan recognized him immediately, having met him a few times at executive events. But today, Anthony had no bodyguards, no press. Just another frustrated customer. Denied a loan he clearly should have been approved for long ago. They rejected me last week, Anthony said, his eyes fixed on the teller counter. Perfect credit score, stable financials, clean payment history. I met every single requirement. And yet, not a single valid explanation. Nathan nodded slightly, pretending to empathize as just another stranger. But inside, every word Anthony said began connecting with what Nathan had already witnessed that morning. They told me the system flagged me as high risk, Anthony continued. But I know better. Someone from inside the bank whispered to me there was a way to improve my chances. Not officially, of course. You mean, Nathan hesitated, probing carefully, a special processing fee? Anthony turned to him, his gaze sharp. A fancy word for a bribe, 10% of the loan amount in cash handed to a middleman. No receipts, no guarantees. Refuse, and your file disappears from the system. Forever. Nathan's hand tightened in his coat pocket, just as he feared. And do you know who's behind this? He asked. Anthony lowered his voice, glancing around. The name I heard was Rachel Kim, a mid-level employee in the credit department. But she's just a front. The one really running things is someone named Victor Tran. That name, made Nathan's heart skip a beat. Victor Tran, a senior executive board member, known publicly as a financial architect, brilliant, forward-thinking. But there had always been rumors, unconfirmed whispers of offshore shell companies and shadow accounts. Anthony pulled out his wallet and handed Nathan a business card. "I'm Anthony Ruiz. If anything shady ever happens to you here, give me a call. I might not be able to stop this alone, but if enough of us speak out..." Nathan accepted the card and nodded. "Thanks. Something tells me we'll be in touch." As Anthony walked away and disappeared into the crowd, Nathan stood in silence. Inside his mind, the puzzle pieces were falling into place. A sophisticated corruption network, exploiting the loan system, siphoning money from elderly customers, creating fake accounts, then funneling the funds through shell companies. And every thread led back to Victor Tran. Summit National Bank wasn't just struggling with customer service, it was rotting from the inside out. And if Nathan didn't act soon, people like Mrs. Langston, like Anthony Ruiz, would only be the next names on an endless list of victims. That afternoon, Nathan Hale sat in a small cafe a few blocks away from Summit National Bank's branch 212. He placed an old laptop on the table, opened a private browser window, and sent an encrypted message to Lena Brooks, the head auditor he trusted most in the entire bank system. A few minutes later, she replied, "Come to my office, alone, no phone." Lena's office was on the 11th floor of the main headquarters. Over the years, she had repeatedly raised alarms about irregularities in loan approvals and vanishing funds from elderly customers' accounts. But every time she filed a report, higher-ups would handle it internally, and everything would disappear into silence. Nathan entered via the side stairwell. He didn't say a word. He simply held out the loan rejection notice he had received that morning under the alias Daniel Shaw, a flawless application he had created for this undercover mission. Lena glanced at the paper. "I checked. That file should have been auto-approved. There's absolutely no reason for it to be denied unless..." She paused, eyeing the securely locked door. "Unless it was flagged internally. On someone's orders." Nathan frowned. "Whose orders?" Lena handed him a thick folder wrapped in an old, unmarked brown cover. "I can't say for sure, but multiple data points indicate Rachel Kim as the final approver in several irregular loan cases, especially where off-system processing fees were funneled through a third party." "Third party?" Nathan asked. "A network of offshore accounts. Internal codename, Apex 17. I tried tracing it, but everything led to shell companies. Until I found this." She pulled out a transaction ledger, a special executive bonus wired to one individual, Victor Tran. The name rang like a warning bell. Nathan's grip tightened around the strap of his bag. "Do you have anything more concrete?" Lena nodded, her expression grave. "I do, but I can't send it electronically. They're monitoring all internal emails and network activity. Tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Meet me in the underground parking lot at Westside Logistics in the financial district. Bring an external hard drive. I'll give you everything. The system code, the money flow, all of it." Nathan started to nod, but Lena placed a hand on his. Her voice dropped. "Mr. Hale, please be careful. These aren't just your average corrupt executives. There's something colder, more professional behind this." "Are you saying," he whispered. "The Apex Consortium," she whispered back. The air in the room seemed to freeze. That name, even as a rumor, had surfaced in international investigations before. A shadow financial network, operating through banks, insurance companies, and venture capital firms with one goal: to control power through money flow. Nathan now understood. He wasn't investigating a mere scandal anymore. He was stepping into a war between justice and financial darkness. And his enemy was operating from within the very bank he led. The next morning, the atmosphere at the main branch of Summit National Bank was taut, like a wire pulled too tight. Clara Langston, daughter of Mrs. Langston, arrived clutching a thick stack of documents, eyes red from sleepless nights. She had lost all patience. After submitting 3 formal complaints and receiving nothing but cold, canned email responses like "your case has been processed per protocol," today she had come to confront them face to face. Clara walked straight to the reception desk, her voice firm. "I want to speak to the person responsible for the $80,000 that vanished from my mother's retirement account in under 6 hours." The receptionist fumbled, hand hovering over the internal call button. Moments later, Rachel Kim, senior credit officer, appeared. Her makeup flawless, her office attire impeccable, and her smile colder than the bank's air conditioning. "Hello, Ms. Langston. I'm Rachel. Would you mind coming up to a conference room? We can speak privately." Clara shook her head. "Number? I want to speak right here, in front of the customers, so everyone can see how this bank treats an elderly woman who lost her entire life savings." Several people waiting in line began to pay attention. A man murmured, "Is that Mrs. Langston? I thought she got scammed somewhere else." Rachel's smile tensed. "I understand you're upset, but all transactions were verified as authorized. If there's been an error, we will continue to look into it." "Error?" Clara cut in, voice cracking. "My mother has early-stage memory loss. Someone used her personal information, logged in from a different state, and transferred her savings into a phantom account. And all this bank has done is send pre-written emails." A heavy silence settled over the lobby. The tension grew thick. At that moment, Nathan Hale, still undercover in his white shirt and jeans, stepped forward, as if he had just stumbled into the middle of it all. "I'm a customer too, but I have a question. If this happened to my mother, would the bank also respond with, 'We'll look into it'?" Rachel Kim blinked. Her polished composure began to crack. Clara looked at Nathan, then nodded. "Exactly. I have all the evidence. Login logs, phishing emails, transaction statements showing suspicious activity. But every time I ask for an IP trace or a deeper audit, they refuse." Rachel snapped, her voice rising for the first time. "You're disrupting the branch. If you continue, I'll be forced to call security." So this is when the bank ejects those who ask the right questions. Nathan's voice was soft, but sharp as a blade. Rachel froze. Her eyes darted to the security desk. 2 guards began to approach, but then Lena Brooks walked in. Unannounced, uninvited. In her hand was a black folder marked Internal Confidential. She handed it to Clara. "You'll need this. It contains copies of transaction records I accidentally printed before my access was blocked." Rachel turned pale. Lena continued, "And I've also sent a copy to the Langston family's attorney and to the press. If Summit National Bank doesn't return the stolen funds within 48 hours, the media will see everything." The room erupted. One customer stood up and shouted, "I got denied a loan with no explanation too." Another joined in, "They overcharged my fees for 2 straight months and no one owned up to it." A crowd began to form around the counters. Employees panicked. The branch manager was nowhere to be found. Rachel Kim gripped her purse tightly, then quietly retreated. Amid the chaos, only Nathan remained still, silent, watching. He knew this moment was the spark, and the flame it ignited would burn through the carefully polished mask of morality that the corrupt had worn for too long. Summit National Bank was no longer an untouchable fortress. It was cracking, and he would be the one to bring it down. The right way, at the right time. That night, Nathan Hale didn't go home. Instead, he drove straight to an old underground parking garage beneath an abandoned office complex on the outskirts of the city. The air reeked of oil and mildew, and the flickering fluorescent lights overhead made the entire space feel even more eerie. The person he was meeting had arrived first. Lena Brooks sat behind the wheel of a beat-up sedan, her face drawn and pale after too many sleepless nights. She stepped out, holding a small metal box, inside it a portable hard drive containing everything she had quietly gathered over the past 3 months. "I don't know if you still trust me," Lena said softly, her voice low and tired. Nathan nodded, his eyes grave. "I don't need trust. I need the truth." They got into Nathan's car and shut the doors. Lena opened the box, handed him the drive, and began to explain. "This data isn't just about irregular transactions. I traced a series of phantom loans, funds that never actually reached real customers. A complex web of transfers through shell corporations, all funneling into one offshore account under a mysterious name, Apex Consortium." Nathan narrowed his eyes. "Apex?" Lena nodded. "I used to think it was just some shady investment group. But the deeper I dug, the more I realized they're buying out entire leadership structures, not just at Summit." She pulled out a folder from her bag, photocopied documents, encrypted emails, transaction analysis sheets, and a list of account codes belonging to senior executives. Among them was a name Nathan knew all too well, Victor Tran. Nathan gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Victor was the one I nominated to be executive director of the Northeast region." Lena spoke slowly. "And he's the one approving every rejected loan, then back-channeling them through special permissions to third parties. Mr. Ruiz, Mrs. Langston, they're all pawns in the same game." Suddenly Lena lowered her voice. "I think they know I have a copy of the data." Nathan's instincts sharpened. His eyes swept across the garage. "You're being followed?" Lena nodded faintly. "I noticed remote access on my computer, and someone's been tailing me for the last 2 days. Yesterday, a close colleague of mine was suspended. No explanation." Just then, a faint sound echoed from the far end of the parking structure. Nathan quickly turned on the flashlight on his phone and aimed it toward the noise. Nothing, but on the concrete floor was a fresh footprint. Nathan turned back to Lena. "We have to leave. That drive must stay safe." He popped open the trunk and revealed a hidden compartment, pre-installed for emergencies. He placed the hard drive inside, sealed it with a biometric lock. "Get to a safe location. I'll handle the rest." Lena placed a hand over his, her expression intense. "If something happens to me, don't trust anyone on the board, and never confront Victor without public evidence." Nathan stared at her, then nodded. He understood now. Apex wasn't just a shadowy organization, it was the darkness behind the light, manipulating from the highest seats of power inside the bank. And if he wanted to bring it down, he would have to step into the most dangerous place of all, the very heart of the system he helped build. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight hit the cold glass panes of the Summit National Bank headquarters, Nathan Hale, no longer in disguise, stepped into the private elevator reserved for the executive board. He wore a dark, tailored suit, neatly buttoned. But his face betrayed a quiet tension. In his hand was a thin folder, its contents nothing but blank sheets of paper. A tactic. A test. The elevator ascended to the 40th floor, the location of the strategic executive meeting room, or more accurately, the domain of Victor Tran, where the bank's most critical decisions were quietly orchestrated. The door opened. Victor was already there. Backlit by floor-to-ceiling windows, the morning light cast a halo around the high-backed leather chair, making Victor look like a statue carved from authority itself. He smiled and raised a small espresso cup. "Nathan, I didn't expect you back so soon." Nathan sat across from him, his eyes steady. "I thought it was time for a candid conversation." Victor nodded, gestured for his assistant to leave. The door shut softly, leaving just the two men, two forces from opposite sides of a war, in a silence thick enough to cut. A pause before Victor spoke first. You've been digging, haven't you? His voice was calm but laced with menace. Ruiz, Mrs. Langston, Clara, names no one ever cared about. Yet now they end up on the CEO's desk. Nathan leaned back in his chair, unshaken. What about the name Apex Consortium, an organization no one has heard of, yet somehow wields the power to make millions vanish with a few clicks? Victor smiled, but his eyes were icy. Careful, Nathan. There are some things, once you know, you can't unknow. Nathan leaned forward slightly. You know what disgusted me the most, Victor? Not the stolen loan money. It was the look in Mrs. Langston's eyes yesterday. That woman lost everything. Because you believed she was too old, too weak, too invisible for anyone to care. Victor's expression darkened. He placed the espresso cup down with a quiet thud. It's a shame you've forgotten who you are, Nathan. You're the CEO of one of the most powerful banks in the country, not some moral crusader. I haven't forgotten. Nathan stood, his voice sharp. I am the CEO, and for that very reason, I'll make sure people like you are swept out of this institution. Victor stood too, stepping closer. You think you'll win? With Lena Brooks, a few powerless clients, and some unverified data. You have no idea who you're up against. I do, Nathan said, his voice low but unwavering. I'm up against Apex, and I won't stop. The silence between them snapped taut, like a drawn wire. Their eyes locked, and for a moment time held its breath. In Nathan's ears, his heartbeat thundered. The room around them felt colder than ever. Victor stepped back half a pace and smirked. Then the game begins. I look forward to your next move, Nathan. Nathan turned and walked out, each step echoing sharply against the marble floor. Cold, loud, resolute. Behind him, Victor was already making calls. The game was on, but only one of them was playing it with real blood on the line. The skies over Boston were grey that afternoon. Clouds hung thick like a curtain before a storm. But the real storm was brewing inside Summit National Bank, where the 40th floor was preparing for a press conference unlike anything seen in the history of modern banking. Nathan Hale, no longer the man in a wrinkled shirt and disguise, but the CEO in a commanding charcoal suit, stepped up to the podium. In front of him stood a packed room of journalists, cameras ready to flash. Beside him stood Lena Brooks, the woman who had risked her career and life to stand at his side. He began slowly, I apologize, not for what I'm about to say, but for what I've allowed to happen in the shadows for far too long. A ripple spread through the room. Nathan paused, his eyes scanning the crowd. Behind him, the LED screen slowly faded from the Summit National Bank logo, replaced with bold words, Apex Consortium, exposing a financial crime syndicate. Almost immediately, video footage began to play, a recording of Rachel Kim discussing special processing fees. Footage of Victor Tran shaking hands with foreign representatives in a secret meeting. A spreadsheet of mass transfers into offshore accounts, under shell corporations linked to Apex. The room fell silent. Nathan's voice dropped. Summit was exploited, our systems manipulated, our customers betrayed. But today, that ends. A direct hit right into Apex's heart. Suddenly the back doors of the conference room burst open. Victor Tran appeared, face pale, holding a sleek card, a temporary board-issued CEO suspension order. You have no authority here, he shouted. Security, remove him. But no one moved. Instead, an IT staff member stepped forward, Kevin Morales, secretly hired by Nathan after his meeting with Clara Langston. Kevin plugged a second USB into the display system. On screen appeared a global transaction map. Tangled streams of money flowing between accounts, countries, shell entities. The name Apex Consortium blinked at the center. Lena stepped forward, her voice sharp. We've submitted the full data set to the Department of Justice, the FBI, and the Treasury. What you're seeing is irrefutable proof of money laundering, bribery, and the manipulation of financial policy on an international scale. Click. From the audience, Anthony Ruiz and Clara Langston stepped up to the podium, holding legal filings and a class action lawsuit signed by hundreds of defrauded customers. Victor backed away, stunned. "You can't prove any of this." Nathan raised his hand. The final screen appeared, a secret recording of Victor speaking with a foreign operative connected to Apex. "I think that's enough." Right then, the side doors flung open. FBI agents stormed in. "Victor Tran, Rachel Kim, you are under arrest for charges of money laundering, financial conspiracy, and treason." Victor resisted, but it was over. The room erupted. Cameras captured every second. The footage went viral. The hashtag #sign collapse of Apex shot to the top of trending lists nationwide within an hour. That night, back in the CEO's office, Nathan stood by the window, gazing out over a city glittering with light. Lena entered holding 2 cups of coffee. "The board's meeting first thing tomorrow. Do you think they'll keep you?" Nathan gave a tired smile. "I don't care anymore. I just want to know. Those people today, the ones who trusted us again, even just a little, will they start believing in the system once more?" Lena looked at him, then nodded softly. "They already have. No one expected that a CEO would have to go undercover just to see the truth inside his own bank. No one imagined that a man who had it all, power, wealth, status, would risk everything just to fight for justice on behalf of an elderly woman, an honest businessman, and hundreds of victims silenced by the system. But Nathan Hale did it because he understood a system is only strong if it protects the vulnerable. A bank is only trustworthy if it stands with those who entrust it with their hopes. And sometimes all it takes is one person brave enough to say no to the darkness, to drag an entire shadow empire into the light. If you believe justice still matters, that truth can still win. Hit that subscribe button to follow more stories with power and purpose. And don't forget to share this video, because you never know. Your small action might just change someone's future. See you in the next story, where the quiet ones often make the greatest impact.